All right, folks. Today we're talking about the Power BI development checklist. If you haven't already got the checklist, you'll need to download it. But essentially, this is our step-by-step. It's 9 steps at the moment. I'm actually going to add a step. It's going to be 10 steps. Um, Guide to Power BI development. We want to really just step by step through this. I want to create a bit of a project plan, and we might do that as a part of today's session as well. See how I'm feeling about that. I'll just open project over here. And that'll be your project plan template that you can use for your Power BI stuff. I'm just opening some stuff on my other tab. All right, so we have the checklist. Done. Tick. Here is the checklist. So let's talk a little bit about step number one, defining the objectives and the scope. So there's a couple of things here. One of them is that this is maybe the most important step. There's one other step later that I think is also very, very important, but this is the one that is going to really define whether you um, whether you're successful or not. And it lays down the foundation for everything that we do going forward, right? So what are some of the challenges around stakeholder alignment? Well, and defining the objectives? Well, there's just so many of them, right? So projects will fail if you have stakeholders that do not that have influence over what you're trying to do and are not brought into the project, or they're not kept in the loop, right? So there's a huge risk of stakeholders scuttling the project or scuttling your report or whatever you're trying to do. So you need to know who all of those stakeholders are, and that's what identify the stakeholders is about. There's lots of different ways that you can do identifying stakeholders. I'm just going to see, I know there's a few frameworks, and we can maybe talk about some of the stakeholder identity frameworks. Let's have a look at this. So you have internal and external. I know I'm not showing my screen, but don't worry, I'll get to it. Stakeholder analysis matrix. That's what I was thinking of. Let's have a look at this. Here's a random. Here's a random image I found on the internet. But this gives you, so you have this idea of a matrix, right? So you're thinking this, you're building this particular thing. In our case, it'll be some kind of report. And then you have how much power they have and how much interest they have in the project. And so you have these high power, low interest people, you have low interest, low power people, you have high interest, low power people, and you have high power, high interest people. So your users might be high interest because they have to use the system. You might be changing the way that they do their reporting. You might be changing the way they run their meetings. You might be changing the different bits and pieces about what they're doing. So they're high interest, but they don't necessarily have a lot of power in the way it gets delivered. Whereas these people are both involved in the project, so they're high interest and they're potentially high power, and they could be an SME, an executive, a BA, and a PM. So at a minimum, you need to ensure that you're high power, high interest people. And a lot of people only talk to these people, right? But there may be people over here. Regulator is a great example of somebody who's potentially has a lot of power over what you're doing that isn't necessarily interested specifically in your project, but can, if they decide to, knock it on the head. Okay. These people over here, they are low power and low interest. You don't necessarily need to keep them in the loop, and that's why poor old help desks and system administrator people don't necessarily get kept in the loop in these things, but they potentially have the power to escalate to one of these people or escalate to one of these people if you keep them too far. If you do something that's eventually going to affect help desk because you're creating problems, then suddenly they become into this more high interest phase, and you do need to start paying attention to them. So, so this kind of matrix is a great way to think about how your stakeholders who your stakeholders are and how much interest they have in the project that you're doing. Now, if you're in a small organization, you probably can pretty easily do this. It might be a couple of 5-minute thing where you just write down the names of all of the people that you think fit into this thing. If you're in a larger organization, this could take a few weeks to figure out who's going on, who's who in the zoo, and all of the different pieces, right? So regardless, it's a step that you have to take, and it's a step that requires ticking off the list. You can't ignore it. So it's an unignorable. So we need to tick this off the list as our first piece. Who are the stakeholders? And for that, we use the matrix. And what I'll do is I'll create a template for that matrix, and I'll put that in the school community. So I'm going to write that down as a thing for me to do. Create template for a stakeholder matrix. And then I'll put in some typical stakeholders for a Power BI report, or for an analytics solution, I should say, because we should use this for Fabric as well. And so then you've got it there. Stakeholder matrix. To do. Okay, once you have all of your stakeholders identified, we need to run workshops. So you're going to need to potentially run workshops with these people. You're potentially going to run workshops with these people. And I would recommend that you do both. So you've got at least one workshop that involves everybody, or you might have 2 workshops. There is a series of workshops that needs to happen before you can begin a reporting project. I don't know any way to be successful in reporting without running a workshop. And we need a template for how to run those workshops. So just off the top of my head, thinking about how you run your stakeholder workshops, the way that we do it is your first workshop should be invariably, depending on who the people are, these people, they might not yet know anything about Power BI, right? So you may need to introduce the concept and introduce what Power BI is at some point. But typically the way that the way that workshops tend to run is that there's an introductory phase. If you don't know each other, you will need to introduce yourself. You'll need to tell people what your role is as the person who's going to build this solution, whatever it is. You'll also potentially need to just lay the groundwork for your authority in this space. So tell people why you're experienced in this. I've done this a million times. We teach our consultants to ensure that they never miss, just laying down why you're an authority in this space. It is very helpful for particularly executives and these sponsors and people like this who are at this higher level, who might not necessarily know who you are, is that they will be thinking, why do I have to listen to this person, right? And so you need to ensure that as a part of that workshop, you need to lay down at least lay the foundation for why you're an authority. And it might be that you don't have a huge amount of experience in Power BI and you're getting started. If that's the case, then what you have to do is lay the rest why you're the right person to be doing this in terms of, well, I know this, I'm an SME in this space, those sorts of things. So get some introductions happening, run that workshop with the people, and we'll lay out a bit of a framework for the best way to do those workshops. The core part of these workshops is to figure out there's 2 things. One is the business process that's associated with this reporting. And the second one is what are the key business questions and metrics that these people are trying to answer. Okay. The process thing cannot be overlooked. So many people in Power BI world go from their they walk into a report meeting and they bring a data set and they say, I want to build reporting on top of this data set. And that's actually not the important part. The important part is understanding the business process, that these metrics that the business process you're trying to analyze, and what are the metrics associated with that, and what are the steps in that process. I cannot stress this enough. Everybody seems to not quite fully grok why this is the case, and it's kind of baffling. And people will want to go to I want to build show me a bar chart with the total number of sales in it, and you say to them, I need to understand more about the sales process, and they say, why? You don't need to know my sales process to understand why I want a bar chart. There is this disconnect between people's understanding of what metrics they want versus why they want those metrics. And people get in their heads that they want a sales dashboard or whatever dashboard, and then they want particular things on that dashboard, but they're not very good at explaining why those things are important. And the reason why they're not very good is because often they're not important, and people are they're doing measurement for measurement's sake. And so there is a balance at this stage, and you have to have this conversation early. You cannot have this conversation later in the piece. You need to have these conversations around what are the important metrics, what's the process we're tracking, and then why are these metrics important? Like, how are they going to move the needle, and what action are we going to take? You need to have all of that up front. If you don't have that conversation up front, you're guaranteed to build a report that only one person thinks could have been useful for the set of users, but none of the users actually think that it's useful, and you end up in a bad place. And and there is a tendency for executives and sponsors and SMEs to make unilateral decisions around what is an important metric when that is just not the case. And this is maybe one of the most difficult parts of being an analyst and a Power BI analyst, is that you're often faced with this reality that you're building something that actually isn't that useful for people. And so, as much as possible in these early stages when we're talking to stakeholders, you need to try and bring them back on track. It's something that I deal with literally every day. I have conversations with customers. A lot of my role is going in these early stages and having those conversations with customers. And if we don't have those conversations, we end up building something that people don't find valuable, and potentially they don't see the value in paying us for that, right? That's so because we're in the consulting game. And so it's super, super important. And that's why I'm rabbiting on about it now. It's super, super important that we ensure that the value for what you're going to be building is there. And if the value is not there, then the rest of the project you might as well not do, because it's a very expensive exercise. And so tease these things out, and what I'll try to do is collate as much of my thoughts around how to run these stakeholder workshops to get these to tease out these things, because they need to happen, and it needs to happen with everybody. There is a tendency, if you're building a solution that goes to some kind of external customer, that they won't want to involve the customer for whatever reason, because they think they know better, or because the customer's too hard, they put it in a too hard basket, or there's something else that people want to do. That happens pretty much every time. To be honest, I haven't, for some reason, people have an aversion to asking their customers what they want. When it comes to reporting, they think that they should be able to infer what the customer wants. And I will say that it feels like they're about 50-50 in terms of success rate there. I think having a direct conversation with the customer is the only way to build really useful reporting for that customer. But it seems that the whole technology world doesn't agree with me. And so we're in a scenario where I actually don't normally suggest going to talk to the customer, because that normally is shot down. And so I will only suggest that if I feel like the people we're building for are connected to their customers in a way that I haven't seen. So that's what the market's like in Australia. Not sure what it's like in other places, and I would expect probably in the US and things like that is more customer focus. But for some reason in Australia, and it's particularly with technology teams and people who are generally responsible for building these reporting systems, they're not very well connected to end users and customers, especially customers who are external to the organization. They would prefer to guess than to actually just go and ask those people. The best possible thing you can do is go and ask them, and you'll be surprised what they say is useful to them and what isn't. And it's almost always different from what the internal people think. So stakeholders are massively important in this whole space. And if you skip these steps, you will build something that people don't find useful. And honestly, It's almost not worth the trouble. So conduct as many stakeholder workshops as you can, tease out that information, and this is what we're trying to identify, right? Key business questions and core metrics. And I should have a thing in here. I'm going to be making updates to the checklist soon. I'm going to add in the business process checklist updates because I think that's just so important. And even I was just talking to a customer yesterday, and we were talking, and it's so weird. There's a weird thing that happens when you talk to stakeholders who are responsible for the building content for end users. And this happens in software development as well. This is not just like a reporting thing. This is anyone who's responsible, who's like technology responsible for external users. They they spend the whole time telling me about the metrics that they want to build, and that they have a clear idea of what the metrics are, but they're very, very unsure. But if you ask them about the process, it's almost like they come alive. They say, well, the reason why we need this is because we've got external people who want to track their regulatory compliance against a certain thing. And, this is what our database does, is it helps them understand what regulatory compliance they're in and they're out of. And then they start to talk a little bit, when they talk a little bit more about the process, the whole tone of the way that they talk about analytics completely changes. And that's the thing that you need to capture, is actually that value proposition almost. It's almost like understanding why is this database valuable is almost a question you could ask, and how do you use it, and what action do you take afterwards? Like, what action do you take as a result of the data in this? Those are the sorts of questions that are going to elicit much better answers than saying to them, what metrics do you want on your dashboard? Because honestly, the metrics are kind of easy if you understand the process and you understand the key business questions and actions they're trying to take. So once you have that, anybody that's kind of paying attention to kind of how to build dashboards and is in the Power BI community will then go, okay, well, I can start to see this piece, right? I can start to see what those business questions are. I want to try an experiment. Hopefully it'll work. You never know. Sometimes these things work, sometimes they don't. I'm gonna get ChatGPT. We're gonna use AI. We always use AI. I want you to act as a business stakeholder in a meeting with a reporting analyst. Reporting for your area. Now, I'm going to tell it to just get creative. Be creative about what your company is and what your specific role is. So that way, I'm not going to tell it to be a sales manager or something. To track your business processes. We'll start with introductions. All right, let's see what it says. Okay, so we're doing a role play with AI. I love this kind of stuff. It's fun. Hi, thanks for setting the session. I'm Alex Morrison, Head of Operations at Everstream Logistics. Okay, we're a mid-sized freight company specializing in time-sensitive deliveries across Australia. My team oversees everything from fleet management to last mile delivery, rely on a lot of moving parts working together. At the moment, we don't have a great way of tracking our operational performance in real time. We get reports, they're usually delayed, don't give us enough insight or bottlenecks or inefficiencies. I want to make sure we're tracking the right metrics to improve our delivery times, reduce costs, and make smarter scheduling decisions. Love to get your before we jumped in, can you give me a quick rundown of your role and how you can help? Right? And so I'd say, hi, I'm Greg Nash. Should do this with voice. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? I'm the principal at DWC, and I built thousands of dashboards for organizations of all sizes. Specifically, because we're talking about logistics, we've helped a number of logistics companies in the past with so logistics are always about like landed cost, with landed costs, with supply chain tracking, supply chain forecasting, and a number of other pieces. Okay, so that's how I would kind of introduce myself. Then it's question time. What question would I ask? I would say, tell me your top 2 or 3 kind of pain points in your process at the moment that you're looking to kind of track with metrics. That's kind of the type of question I would ask. Or what's sort of top 2 or 3 top of mind type things. This top 2 or 3 is an interesting open question. So you start you say what's your top 2 or 3, and what they do is they give you 7 or 8. And the reason why you don't say, give me a top 7 or 8 is that they say, now I have to think of 7 or 8. And if you say, give me your top 1, they only answer with the top 1. So if you say top 2 or 3, it starts them and then they build momentum as they're talking, and then they'll give you all of them. Okay. So it'll be interesting to see how the AI answers. But in real life, what happens is people don't just give you 2 or 3, they'll give you 7 or 8 of their top pain points when it comes to this to reporting. So I'll say, what are your top 2 or 3 pain points that you are looking to track with metrics? It's some question like that is the way I tend to ask these questions. So now it's going to give me a bulleted list, and it's probably going to give me 3, right? Because it's an AI. But what really happens is that it goes that the person will just, this is where you need to be recording the meeting. So top tip is you definitely want to record the workshop, because people will completely unload a huge amount of information on you and expect you to be able to retain it all and put it and organize it into a dashboard, basically just off the strength of that one conversation that they've had. Okay. Now the AI's paused here for a sec. Hopefully it doesn't crash, but we can start with the biggest pain points anyway. So it's come up with, okay, right now our biggest pain points are on-time delivery performance. We need to track how often shipments arrive versus delayed. We have SLAs with our customers if we're missing them, and we need to know why, whether it's due to traffic, warehouse delays, or scheduling issues. That's actually that's reasonably accurate for how somebody would convey that to you. And you can see, if you're thinking about this from a reporting point of view, that's just the first bullet point. And they've already mentioned shipments, on-time shipments, delayed shipments, SLAs, customers. Are they missing their SLAs or are they not missing their SLAs? Why are they missing their SLAs? And then possible causes: traffic, warehouse delays, and scheduling issues. If like I could probably build there's 4 fact tables there potentially. Shipments arrival. So that's on time or delayed. So that'd be in one fact table. Warehouse delay. So warehouse tracking is another fact table. Traffic tracking is another fact table. Scheduling, another fact table. So that's 4 fact tables. We have customers, we have warehouses, we have locations, we have dates. That's 4 dimensions already. That's in one paragraph of the first pain point that person created, right? So you can see the way that people articulate their issues to translate that into a data model that actually would help them track that. There's a lot going on in a very short period of time when you ask this question. Okay. And so it's really helpful to record it. If you can't record it, you need to basically be furiously taking notes. The best times we had with DWC with this is where we had a dedicated person who took notes. Unfortunately, we couldn't afford to keep doing it in that way. But if you have a dedicated person in the meeting and all they do is take notes and they track, they end up with this giant thing going on. They have enough um, experience with note taking, they'll actually end up with a huge amount of notes. Now, so you can see, because it's AI, I said top 2 or 3 pain points, and it doesn't have a brain, so it didn't just keep going, which is what normally people do. So what I'll do is I'll probably get it to do a few more, because this isn't accurate to real life. What they would do is they would say, okay, we need to figure out our DIFOT, on-time delivery, very common in freight forwarding and logistics. DIFOT's massive. That means delivery in full on time, and so that's one. Fleet utilization and downtime. We have a fleet of trucks. I don't think we're using them as efficiently we could be. Some are idle, some are overworked. We'd love to see data usage on vehicle maintenance schedules and where we can optimize our fleet to reduce costs. So just think about that from a fact perspective. So we've got a trucks dimension. Then we need to know how often they're being worked, so idle or overworked. Vehicle usage, that would be fact vehicle usage, fact maintenance schedule. So vehicle usage and maintenance schedule is in one fact table. That's 2 different ones. And then optimize the fleet to reduce costs. I'm not even sure how we'd have to get some more information about that. So in the first 2 things I've mentioned, like 6 fact tables, okay? And now cost per delivery and profitability of the route. So now we're getting into finance, right? So now they want to know all their cost stuff. Some of the routes are black box when it comes to profitability. We need a better visibility in the cost per delivery. So that means you're mixing operations with finance data, because you need to know the costs based on invoices of different things, fuel, driver hours. So that means so now we're tracking fuel. We're tracking the timesheets of drivers to know how many hours they're doing. We're tracking any tolls that get collected along the way, and so how do we track that? And we've also got the maintenance schedule. So maintenance schedule is the only shared fact table in these just these 3. So we've mentioned, I don't know, maybe 10 fact tables just in the 3 pain points that this person's created for us. And then interestingly, they say that's a big feature. Does that align with what you've seen before? Where would you typically start? And this is where you need to do your kind of scope minimization, right? Because this is too much to bite off in one chew. But it's great that you've got all of this. This means you have unlimited work to do for this person, and it's really just about value proposition from then on, right? So when you're in your initial stakeholder meetings, you're going to get information in this kind of format, and you need to be able to translate that into a conceptual data model, which is what I'm kind of doing when I talk about these fact tables and things like that. That's way more, that's plenty. I'm not going to get any more out of it, but actually what will happen, like I say, is that you will get probably 6 or 7 of these types of responses. Sometimes not. Sometimes people are like, you know what? All we're interested in is on-time delivery performance. That's the biggest pain point. That's going to move the needle for us. And like I was in a meeting last week where that just happened to be that way. We had 2 meetings with separate people, and they all spoke about the same process. They only spoke about, it wasn't on-time delivery performance, obviously, but it was a operational thing. And it's like everyone said, you know what our biggest problem is? On-time delivery performance. You know what our biggest problem is? And then you get into the executive meeting and they're like, hey, we need this report, and what we need to show is on-time delivery over time. And you're like, okay, everyone's talking about the same process. And so that's great when that happens, because then there's an obvious win. And then it's difficult because everybody talks about this one process, and then the person who hired you is like, but I want our financial reporting done first. And you're like, literally everybody is talking about this thing, and you're asking for this thing, and I know you've hired me to do that. And so it's like, how do we bring these 2 things together, right? So that's that's a consulting thing if you're in, but that could happen to you as well. Like you're in these meetings and you see this clear pattern emerge, and then and people are like, but we want finance manager says that they want financial reports, and you're like, there's this whole giant thing here that's going to move the needle for the business, and that it's not that difficult to deliver. If we focus on that, your finance numbers will work out. You don't need to track them anymore, And so there is definitely an aspect of when you're having these initial meetings, that you're looking for these kind of patterns, and you're doing that kind of modeling as you go. All right, so that was good. So we've spoken about the process, so that's going to go in here. I think we need to. So we get the top two or three. We get that process, and then from here we'll focus on DIFOT. DIFOT seems fair enough, and there was a few different bits and pieces there. Okay, let's focus on DIFOT. What are the key questions you are looking to answer in this process? Something like that, right? So you're now asking them about their key business questions. What are the questions you're really trying to answer? Framing the question like that. And this is where people start to go, well, I want to know, I want a graph that shows me, trend over time. And you're like, no, no, no. What is let's talk about the delivery process, and then talk to me about the questions you want to answer in the process. Sometimes you got to take them back to the process. So actually, maybe a better question that I could have asked here is, tell me about the delivery process. Where does it start? Where does it end? And how does it work? Rather than asking them about questions. So I might adjust that after AI wakes up here, because we're still in process mode here. They spoke about the top pain points. They identified one process, the delivery in full on time process. And so what's the delivery? So that's the delivery process. So tell me about the delivery process. Where does it start? Where does it end? How does it track? And then what are the systems you interact with as you go through that process? All of those are really, really interesting questions to be asking at this point. And then from there, you probably will start to be able to identify questions. Okay, good call. DIFOT is a huge priority for us. Here are the key questions we need to answer. So we want to know about our overall performance, the cause of late deliveries, the customer orders and insights, the route carrier and performance. So they very rarely would they actually give you questions like this. AI is really good at coming up with business questions. This is one of the hacks you can actually do, is that you can ask them about the process and then actually bring up AI and say, okay, well, let's see what key questions we think might help that. And then you can pick out of a list. People have a much easier time picking out of a list of questions that you provide them than going away and coming up with the questions themselves. They will struggle with it. I've got a customer at the moment who's been struggling over questions for like 3 or 4 days, and that's just because he wants to get it right, and he's trying really hard to articulate things in a way that he thinks is going to make it easier for us. But the reality is, all he has to do is just say these, like fairly simple kind of questions, and we can infer what the metrics can be after that. So these questions are better than what you would normally get from a real person. Um, uh, I'm going to ignore the questions for now, and I'm just going to ask about the process. Tell me about the delivery process. How does it work? Okay, sure. Let me walk you through our delivery process from start to finish. Okay, so this is way better. So this is way better, right? So I definitely need to add in the process question before we start talking about business questions, because look how much sense this starts to make. Okay, so now we have order placement and processing. So first, customers place an order via an online portal. There's EDI integration, or it manually comes through customer service. That's actually quite accurate for the freight industry. That's usually how these things kind of work, right? So they have a website, people place the order. There's EDI that sends it through to the thing, or they ring someone up. Basically, what they're saying, right? So think about this from a modeling point of view, right? Think about this from a modeling point of view. If you're thinking about modeling data, need to bring whiteboard up. Okay, so you've got an order placement and processing process. So you can start to imagine what this process is like. So they've got customers. Oh, where's my little drawing tool? I want you to draw. I want to draw a little person. Here's my customer. They could come in through the portal, the website, or they could come in through a phone call. Oh, look at this phone. Go me. All right. Um, So they come in through a website or through a phone call. There's, there's like Gen Z's going, that's not a telephone. Anyway, and we put an E on it for a website because it's Internet Explorer. All right. And then it goes into their ordering system. Now, if you're a data modeler and someone says just that first piece to you, you know what I'm thinking? I'm like, how do they track these? And how do they track this? Is it, I need a fact, website visits, and I need a fact phone calls, right? Now, if I had to guess, it probably goes in the CRM. Uh, guess what? Guess what often happens? This phone calls, definitely. An activity should go into the CRM saying that I received a phone call and here's the customer and blah, 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 blah. And then they create an order and that goes into the ordering system, which maybe is a CRM or something else. But do website visits go in the CRM? Probably not. They probably go in like what? Google Analytics, the Googs, right? So I need to track data out of the Googs if I want to get this, and I want to track data out of the CRM if I want to get this. Super complicated. We're only at order placement because the questions could be how many orders get placed? How many? Or how many phone calls do we get? Or what's our conversion rate of people who call up or visit the website and go to the thing? So there's all of this, just this piece of the puzzle is its own probably fact with a few dimensions to make that happen. Yeah. And if you're new to Power BI and you're still learning data modeling, don't worry, we'll get you there. But we need to we need to be able to come up with a semantic model that potentially answers questions associated with this. Now, that's jumping way ahead, right? They might not have any questions about this part of the process. This might not be the place, which means building this semantic model will be a complete waste of time. But you can see how much complexity there is in what seems like that's one paragraph. That's literally this paragraph. The customer places an order via the online portal. There's EDI integration. That's what this is. EDI. It's moving data into EDI integration. Sorry, no, that's a whole other thing. EDI integration is where the customer is external and then they send the order directly into your ordering system via EDI. Electronic document integration or whatever it stands for. So they don't talk to your website and they don't talk to a person. They literally put the order directly into your ordering system. So now we've got three different fact tables. So our potential data model looks like this now because we've got Google website visits, we've got phone calls out of the CRM, and we've got EDI integration activities. And then join all your dimensions to that. So lots of complexity in one paragraph. Orders are validated. So we need to know is there a problem with validation? So we need to think about that. But let's just talk about the process. This is what you can easily overwhelm yourself if you think about all of the possible things you could report on because there's actually usually quite a lot. And that's why reporting projects get so messed up is because that there's just so many questions you could ask. Which are the ones that actually create problems? And I love that they've given us this potential issues at the bottom. This is what you need to be asking if they're not giving it to you, right? So they say, okay, here's the first part of the process is customers talk to via our online portal, EDI integration. They come through customer service. We make sure the customers are correct and we put them in a warehouse. And then, so this is all happening in our warehouse distribution system, for example. Then the warehouse picks and packs it and stages the shipment for dispatch. Just think of it like that. Just that is a complex model. Issues are how delays in order processing, incorrect information, and stock shortages. Okay, well, so we could build a solution that is so if we translate that into question, how late what is the current state of orders and how late are they? or something like that, right? That's a report. Here's our orders. How late? That's a whole report page right there. And you say, well, we've had 473 orders today and then 67 late orders. And here's the trend of lateness over 12 months. Is it going up or down? And then here's the breakdown of late orders by their category. And here's the people that are who are in the warehouse who are responsible for the most late orders. There's your how late is my order dashboard. One sentence. The orders have incorrect information. Is the information data quality dashboard for orders. Data qual. And on the data quality dashboard, we have the total number of orders, the total orders that have bad data. Yeah. What's the trend of bad data over time? Is it getting better or worse? And here's the people that are responsible for bad data who did the data entry, the top 5 offenders. And then here is the top 5 customers via EDA who put in bad data, EDI who put in bad data. That's your data quality dashboard. Well, guess what? You track that, you fixed it. Now, have you actually fixed it? I don't know. Like there might be really tough, you might have to have tough conversations with customers to actually fix the problem. But I tell you what gets measured gets managed. And if you build a dashboard like that, I guarantee those data, and then you put it up somewhere where people can see it, I guarantee that incorrect information thing starts to go away because people realize that you're actually tracking it. And that is the value of building analytics in your organization, right? Stock shortages. Guess what? We can create another dashboard called stock shortages. Is stock short? What's the reorder process? How much stock is below its reorder level? When was the last time we ordered? What is the lead time for stock? All of the things associated with stock, just stock ordering isn't a whole data model in itself because there's a lot of complexity in there. You can start to predict future stock levels and when's your reorder volume and when does it need to happen and let's do some ML. And so just solving our order placement and processing, there's a significant amount of work in building just those pieces out. So they talk about order placement, then they do shipment scheduling and dispatch. They've got poor route optimization, driver shortages, scheduling inefficiencies. You've got congestion breakdowns, delays at transfer hubs. So if you can get the process and then you can get the problems associated with that process, you see how easy it is to come up with a dashboard that helps in that space. And that is much, much, much better, a million times better than saying to them, what do you want on your dashboard? Because what they'll do is they'll be like, oh, what we'd like to see is our number of orders coming in, and I'd like to know a breakdown by EDI versus orders. And then I would like to know a breakdown by EDI versus Google versus phone call. And then I'd like to see the trend of orders and how many orders are coming in and then who orders stuff. And you spend all this time building out this orders dashboard. And the root cause is the orders are late. You could have just built this dashboard, 6 things on it, and then you've solved the problem. You don't even need to build this. No one cares about how many orders are coming in. That's not the problem right now. Let's fix the problem, right? Let's fix the issue, not talk about orders that no one cares about. And so even though that appears like it's valuable because and what they're thinking is, well, we need to know the orders so we can figure out which ones are the late orders. Like they might have that underlying thing, but they don't realize that just building out that orders model could just like that's a whole model that you don't necessarily even need to build to get the how late is my order or how late is my shipment or whatever it is thing, because you just build a model specific to that problem. So it stops people just building vanity metrics or metrics that don't actually do anything. So you want to identify issues in process and then build solutions that highlight the issues for people so that they can do whatever they need to do to go and fix that issue. That's going to be where the value in analytics is going to be in your organization. So shipment scheduling and dispatch, what are the issues? Poor route, driver shortages. So you build a driver availability dashboard, right? Now, if you didn't know that, what they might say is, well, can we get driver timesheet information? And then you're like, okay, sure. And then you start building this driver timesheet piece, and then you give it to them. They're like, this doesn't show me whether the driver's available or not. And you're like, well, that's not what you asked for. You asked for driver timesheet. So and that will happen. They will ask for the wrong thing, thinking that it's a stepping stone to the thing that they really want. But the best thing that they can do is just tell you what the actual issues, and then you can build specific solutions for those issues. Scheduling inefficiencies. Okay, so we want to know what's happening on the schedule so that we can try and figure out scheduling inefficiencies. But you might be able to come up with a dashboard that just shows them, you know, suboptimal scheduling for whatever using whatever business rules they have to do that, right? Transit and handover. You can just see how metrics fall out of this. Now we have a look. How long from order to dispatch? See, this is an interesting thing, right? So then they say, can you give us order processing time? How long from order to dispatch? So that we can fix the how late is our order problem, right? But how long from order to dispatch doesn't tell me how many late orders there are. What it tells me is the average time between orders and dispatch. That's a great example of the type of question people ask for. So they're asking for this processing time order placement dashboard, but the solution they want to build actually is just how late are the orders, which is a slightly different, or how many late orders are there, which is a slightly different question, and it's a different metric, and it's a different model to build that metric. Because if you want to tag late orders, then all you need to do is look at what was the expected date, and then what's the threshold, and then you tag it if it's late or not. Number of late orders, which was the problem in this order processing scenario, is a much easier metric to build than how long from order to dispatch, because you might need to pull, because then they're going, what's our status? Because then they say, well, what we want to see is the status of order over time. But really what they're trying to answer is how many late orders are there? Well, it's so, even the AI does it, right? It's like they asked the wrong question to answer to solve the actual issue. Right? There are delays in order processing when we need to know how many are late and who's responsible for them. We don't yes, it's nice to know our order processing time. Like, it's nice to know from placement to dispatch and see the status of those things. But the only thing we really need is to tag how many late orders there are. So something to think about, I guess, like how people ask and answer questions, and then what the real problem is, and then how to actually give them the solution to their problem rather than give them the dashboard that they think is the solution to their problem. And honestly, this is really, really difficult. And sometimes you need to go and just build the thing they ask for. And then they will now often what I do is I build both, and then there's the thing they asked for quickly gets ignored, and the thing that I give them that solves the actual issue is the one they're like, oh, we should expand on this a little bit. There's a bit of an art to it. But that's how I do it. That's honestly what I do is I'll build the extra page without permission, and I'll put that page in and go, oh, I just thought this might be useful as well. And then that becomes the focus of their thing, because that's the thing that actually drives the value. So being a really good Power BI analyst is about identifying what the real kind of underlying process issue is, and then figuring out how to solve that, whilst also building the thing that people are actually asking you to build. Because you can't not do that, because if you don't do that, people will they'll complain that you haven't met the brief, right? And so you're looking for opportunities where both of those things align, and hopefully they do. And if you can have that conversation in the beginning, great. But there is a little bit of, we're building you this, but what we're really building you is the solution underneath. But that's tough, I understand. On-time dispatch rate. Shipments leaving the warehouses on time. So what problem does that solve? Well, I think they're still talking about how late, right? So order processing time and on time dispatch rate are still around how many late orders are there. So those two metrics for one problem. But slow ordering was the main thing, right? On time delivery. So because we're talking about DieFight. So slow ordering. So DieFight, yeah, we want to know these pieces. So this is a DieFight metric, that's a DieFight metric. Transit time variability. How much variability do we see in estimated versus actual delivery times? I kind of like this one. So what you want to do when you're tracking a process is so you got all the steps in the process, and then you've got the time it takes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes in between the process. And then you're looking at the variability of this number. And is it within range? So you're saying from this step to this step takes X number of minutes. And then you're looking at the variability of that, like this. And then you're putting it within a normal range, like this. And you're saying, well, I only care about this bit. And let's say it goes right out of normal range for a bit and then goes back in. This was a Deming thing, right? So Deming used to talk about statistical tracking of processes to figure out whether you're within range or not. So what there's a tendency if you put a line and then you go, well, we're above, and then we're below, and we're above, and we're below, and it goes like this. And Deming's argument was, well, you just should ignore it unless it falls outside the normal range, right? Unless it goes above the normal range, which can be 1 or 2 standard deviations either side of the thing. So this number's always 20. Number's always 20. Maybe I'll move this around a little bit so we can do this. Yep. So this number's always 20, and then 1 standard deviation up is 23, and 1 standard deviation down is 17. And so this step, I only care if this step takes 16 minutes or it takes 24 minutes or whatever, right? 24 hours, whatever it is. These types of statistical tracking of particular numbers inside statuses, honestly, that we should be doing a lot more of this instead of doing like simple dashboards on data quality. This is like advanced process analysis that actually is going to move the needle for your company, because that statistic is going to drive action when it's outside the normal range. It's going to say, okay, for some reason today, and you have a meeting with all of your delivery people, and you say, for some reason today it took us 24 minutes to put the stamp on the box, when normally it takes us 20 minutes. And I wouldn't even be having this conversation with you if it was anything under 23, but for some reason today it's 24. Can you tell me about what's going on? They say, oh yeah, the stamp delivery machine broke down and we couldn't do it. And so we had to wait around for 3 hours before we could start doing stamping again. Okay, we know what the problem is there. And then another one comes along and it says, well, this is only taking you 16 minutes. Let's have a conversation about this. Why is this doing? And they're like, oh, that was because they changed the way the stamps are done, and now we don't have to lick them anymore. They've got sticky back, and so we just pick it up and put it on, and it's really easy. And you say, okay, so that's an improvement in the process that's happened downstream because the stamps are improved. So we should expect to see this number come down towards that 16 number now, because our standard time will come down, which means we can potentially need to adjust our stuff, whatever it is, right? But if you're getting in, this is mature statistical analysis of your processes, and people just don't even get to this point, right? They're stuck in how many deliveries do we have mode, and we're not getting into, how do we optimize the steps in this process? All right. So that's a little bit more about key business questions and the core metrics and KPIs that you use to calculate these questions. Only got a couple of minutes left. We're going to talk about primary audience. So the primary audience is going to be who's using it and how. So why don't we ask our AI? Okay. Who would use the dashboards and how might they use them? To take action. I try to like what actions should they take? This is the kind of question we need to ask. So now they start talking about the different people, right? And who they are. And this is who knows how long how long this is going to come up with because it's AI. Real humans won't come up with a comprehensive a list as this. And this is again another area you can use AI to actually drive a little bit of ideas around, well, maybe we can build something for the operations team. Maybe we could build something for the warehouse team. Maybe we could build something for the customer service team. Maybe we could build something for the sales team so they can do DIFOT reviews with the customer. Literally all of these types of dashboards I've built at one point or another, to be honest. DIFOT's a pretty common thing and there's often all of these things actually apply. And so there's lots of use for this model when we finish it. And yeah, if we can track DIFOT like this, like our delivery in full with statistical anomalies, then that's even better. Is it going to finish? No. So once we say, okay, we're going to build our dashboard for the operations and logistics team, which are the fleet managers, and they're going to monitor real-time DIFOT. They're going to look for bottlenecks. They're going to do fleet utilization, whatever it is. Then the last question we ask, and it's come up with an error, but that's okay. The last question we ask, we know who these people are and how they're going to use it, is, well, can they read a dashboard? What's their data literacy level? Right. Who are what reading level do we need to give them? And this concept of maybe we could create a new concept of data reading level, like we need this to be third grade data reading level where it has to be super simple. Everything has to be very much laid out for them. The numbers have to be very simple, or we can give them this graph and they know exactly how it works because they do this stuff day in, day out. Or you give them a complex matrix and they export it to Excel and they use it. And yes, it's fine for them to export it to Excel. Don't know why people complain about it. Excel's a great tool. Why wouldn't you use it to do your statistical analysis? And so what is the use case for them to do that? And we just deliver the data or the report or whatever it is in that thing. Now, maybe they have very, very low data literacy level and they need an AI that they can talk to that translates everything for them. And they just tells them the high level numbers because they're an executive, whatever it is, right? And so that's the last thing is like, okay, let's choose the executive team. What's the data literacy level? Now, you probably wouldn't ask what's the data literacy level necessarily, but you might ask questions related to this, right? Their data literacy level varies. So then this is what you want to know is like, the CEO, are they in spreadsheets all day or are they someone who likes to talk big picture? Like when they're looking at reports, what the sort of thing that they do? This is you understanding the data literacy level. Whereas, so CEOs moderate, CFO, this is common that they're high because they use Excel a lot. So CFOs are often, but then maybe your strategy and board members are low, which is fairly, and you give them a crayon and a circle of paper. Anyway, that's the first stage of the Power BI checklist. I've got a little addition here to make around process, but this is all about stakeholder alignment, getting everybody on the same page of what we are building, and you can see just how deep what just one of these steps can be if you're really getting into it. This feeds concept design. It also feeds our scope definition. So it has to be done before we can do any of this other stuff. So stakeholder alignment is going to be massive piece of the puzzle. As we go through this process, we'll talk about other things, but that's I thought I was going to do like the whole page. I did one section. So this is going to be potentially a long series, but that's stakeholder alignment in Power BI. Hope you enjoyed and have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.